right, we are digging for wisdom. This is podcast number 2. Y'all remember last week we talked 5A and we broke that thing down. And boy, I'm starting to get used to having guests here, man. I don't have to listen to just Diggs the whole time. I got a couple new guests this week. I got people that are close to me, right? My right-hand man on the weekends is with me, Pat Doney. He's obviously the host of our show, and you'll see him every Friday night, the big game of the week. He's here to help us with 6A. Of course, we got my proximity brother, Kimmy Matthews. We both, when it comes to basketball, we pick games that are close to the house, right? Proximity brothers. So if you don't see him, it's because, you're not looking hard enough too, because he's at almost every game. He's with Friday Night Glory. Of course, Diggsy's with me. We're talking 6A, and we are talking about 2 DFW state title winners. And I don't know how many times it's happened before, but the UIL hands out 2 state titles and they both come out of the same district. That's so 11-6A, they call it the District of Doom. It was definitely a doozy last year, and it looks like another one this year. Let's start off by talking about those 2 teams, Duncanville and DeSoto. I don't know who wants to jump in there, but Duncanville is just as powered. I just ended up doing a story with Colin Simmons, and he told me off camera he's expecting 40 sacks this year for himself, and I kind of laughed and giggled. Then he gave me this dirty look. I looked like I was going to be sack number 1 the way he was looking at me. I was like, all right, 40. You got 40. You're going to play 16 games, so maybe you will get 40 sacks. But talk about that defense. Any one of you that wants to jump in here and talk about, hell, they're well-rounded on both sides of the ball.
I'll jump right in and say that I think Colin Simmons is one of the best players in America. I mean, that shows with the 5-star rating. He can go to college anywhere he wants to in the country. He clearly is on the path of a 3 years in college and then first-round draft pick type of edge rusher. His speed is immediately evident. We saw that in the playoff run last year. We saw it in the state championship game. He's one of the best players in the country. He is a future college and NFL star, it feels like. And as you mentioned, Ward, the mentality is there right away. Anytime you talk to him, any conversation I've had with him, it doesn't seem too big for him. He seems ready for the opportunity to be, once again, the lead guy on the top team in the state. And then on the other side of the ball, how about the running back, Caden Durham? This guy could be a professional track athlete if he wanted to be, but instead he just happens to like running with a football in his hands. We were there for his DeSoto game last year where he took over that game and was unstoppable against, as you mentioned, a team that went on to win a state championship as well. That Duncanville team feels poised to potentially go back-to-back. And now that they've won one, I'm wondering how much that takes the pressure off, and they now can just kind of be ready to show that they are clearly the most talented team in the state of Texas again.
Yeah, they kicked that Buffalo Bills moniker off of their shoulder last. All right, we got ours, so leave us the heck alone. We're in it. We're state titles and we're winning them too. But Kenny, you talk about those players that Pat mentioned. It overshadows players that would be dominant on other teams, like Alex January, right next to Colin Simmons, is one of the best nose tackles out there. You don't hear much about him because the other guy's getting 22.5 sacks, and then on offense they got that junior wide receiver DeCorian Moore, and they got Keelan Russell. They just got players everywhere.
DeCorian Moore is probably arguably the best wide receiver in the class of 2025 in the nation. Talking about, like Pat said earlier, guys that are best in the nation. We're not just talking about DFW area. We're not just talking about the state of Texas. We're talking about the nation. Alex January, the UT commit, he's just a load in the middle. He clogs up so many things that keep those guys free. You got Kadavian Dotson on the back end, and SMU commit. They just, every year I look up at that defensive line and offensive line and say, they're just as good as they were last year. It's amazing for considering a position that's very hard to develop, especially at the high school level. Athletic, big guys that can get after it. They just graduate, they plug into second and third string the next year and don't miss a beat. And arguably, to me, the only team that can match them up is their mirror guys down south in Houston. That's the only team that, to me, that measures up with them physically. You could put all those guys in the middle of the field and pick them up, pick one by one, and you still probably would have a 3-point game at the end. That's how talented both of those schools are. It's unbelievable. But I do make it a good point, though. It'd be interesting to see now that the bullseye is on their back. They've been the chaser for the last 3 years to try to get that. Now they're going to get everybody's best shot, and those guys just a few miles down the road from them, probably going to give them a loaded gun next year too.
Yeah, they got to play that game in Minnesota, right, Diggsy? And they're having that old Trinity problem back in the day where nobody wants to play them in the non-district. They're bringing a couple Florida teams in there, except for the game Pat will be at against Sock game 1. But give me your thoughts on Duncanville, and can North Shore, who's also nationally ranked, are we playing this thing out for another one of those games?
Sorry, Ward, is this our Houston podcast, or are we in DFW? Because last time I looked, there are plenty of good teams in DFW that I think can play with Duncanville. We got my guy Kenny is just going straight to North Shore. You want to go straight to North Shore? I want to take a little bit of a break. Let's go to Louisville a little bit, because you talk about styles make fights. And Louisville has probably the best offensive line in the state of Texas. They've got probably 5 D1 guys. And that's going to be a fascinating thing, because Duncanville, throughout the season, probably 14 games, they're going to have their way in that defensive versus offensive line battle. Louisville, maybe not. Louisville kind of reminds me of old school Trinity. It's funny you mentioned Trinity in that kind of a thing. Wouldn't an old school Trinity versus Duncanville game be fun? And that's what we might get with Louisville this year if Louisville can make it this far. Louisville has some inexperience and they got to learn to win those big games. But if Louisville can get there to the state semifinals, that could be a matchup problem for Duncanville. But Duncanville's got all the right tools this year. Obviously, a lot of big guns, and DeSoto is going to be looking at them, because DeSoto similarly is looking at things like we have all the skill players on the offensive side. So they're gonna have a battle in district. They're gonna have a couple of battles in non-district. In the playoffs, I think there's a couple of interesting matchups. Remember, we're still only 3 or 4 years out from Southlake beating them in an upset in that state semifinals. So Duncanville cannot look past these teams that are going to be good, are going to be difficult matchups for them.
I want to mention real quick about Louisville too, Diggs, just kind of building on that. What a job Michael Odell has done there. I mean, that program was not he was not given the keys to a Ferrari when he showed up with the Farmers, the former state championship winning quarterback, their only state title back in the 90s and all. And now he's back. And as you mentioned, I mean, they're in that talk, in that conversation of maybe they're not as good as Duncanville and North Shore, but they're certainly in that next category. And if a few things go their way, they could be there. I don't think anybody saw Louisville being in that conversation even 3 or 4 years ago. He has done a tremendous job as the head coach there.
Quick note on that. Do you know who had the second best defense in the area?
Who's that?
Louisville. They only gave up 13 points a game. Not bad.
and we brought up the Bills factor. I mean, they're now having the target on their back. They're not. It took Louisville a while to jump past Marcus as the true cream of the crop in 6-6A. Now I think it's by a long shot. And now they're expected things. I mean, Diggs got them at 3.
I wanted something by you guys. I thought they were maybe a year too soon last year. I mean, getting to the regional finals, against Prosper last year. I mean, they were still kind of a young developing team, kind of just buying into the whole Odell thing. With that returning talent you got, Ethan Terrell coming back with, he's 23-4 as a starting quarterback. I mean, he's going into his 3rd year with Ellison behind him. We've already mentioned the Fasasi kid. I mean, he's a potential 2025 5-star offensive lineman. And when you look at that offensive line, that's looking at the same size as Duncanville's offensive line. It's incredible at how big those guys. I don't know what's in the water in Louisville, but those guys, man, are huge. And they graduated 2 very good offensive linemen last year. So, I mean, to have that kind of depth up front like that, I think last year's run is going to pay dividends to them. I'm just not so sure defensively if they can stop Duncanville. Not so sure yet. Yeah. I love the back end guys, though.
Yeah, they got the DBs for sure. Diggsy, before we go blow completely past DeSoto, let's get back to them real quick, because what DeSoto had, first of all, they got their state title under Claude Mathis. He was waiting to get his. He got it. And I feel like they got skill position players for days now. Even with Jonte leaving, they brought in a transfer from Heritage. They got Tiger Ryden. They got Booby Feaster that everybody's talking about. And they got a quarterback that does not throw interceptions. 2 picks, that's it for DJ last year, and like 39 touchdowns. Talk to me about them and how you think they might dominate.
It's fascinating as people are really kind of breaking down DeSoto, and people are kind of at a high level saying, well, DJ Bailey, he might be the problem. He's just not a highly rated guy. He's kind of he's not a Power 5 school kind of a quarterback, but he is so efficient. Sometimes being a great quarterback in the recruiting side is not the same as being a great quarterback on the field. And DJ is a great quarterback on the field. He makes plays. He doesn't make mistakes, as you talked about. And he's got, we talked about Byron Nelson last year. That was our wide receivers for Miles reference. And I'm looking at this team, and and some of their best players could be playing wide receiver, but they're moving them mostly exclusively to cornerback like Jaden Trawick, because they are so loaded at the wide receiver position. TJ Pride, Booby Feaster, Caleb Holmes. I mean, these are players who are going to be top tier players, and they got DeAndre Ryden coming back. This offense, skill players, is fantastic. It almost kind of reminds me of Louisville when you talk about just every player is stacked with a D1 guy or an all district guy. And DeSoto is looking at this like, okay, well, what about on the defensive side of the ball? When we're talking about our district breakdown, we completely ignored Sale Reyes. They got a transfer in who's going to LSU. That's how good their defense is. Mario Buford, Brandon Booker. I mean, their defense in positions are very loaded. I don't think they have the overall depth that Duncanville does, but their skill kids are probably better than Duncanville's skill kids. So it's going to be a fascinating matchup when they play each other. But we always talk about Ric Flair theory on this podcast. DeSoto hasn't got a victory over Duncanville in a while, and I don't see what's going to change this year.
That's true. And Pat was at that last one, and I think he probably had his boy Noah shut that thing down. And after the first quarter, I mean, they had to sit through a rain delay. But after Durham just ran crazy on them, it was like, you want to shut this thing down, go get us some popcorn, Noah? This one's over.
I mean, he gave us the highlights we needed in about 7 minutes of that game. That's for sure. It was unbelievable. And, we left that game kind of feeling like, well, Duncanville's amazing. And DeSoto, maybe they're not quite there just yet. To their credit, I mean, they turned it on and they went all the way through. And then, I mean, they had problems with people picking against them in the playoffs. Denton Geyer, I remember a specific producer from Inside High School Sports coming in pretty strong that he thought Denton Geyer was going to beat DeSoto. They had that plastered on the wall all over the place, bulletin board material. And I mean, they did it, man. They went on and won the whole thing. And now that they've done it, now that they've answered the bell, similar thing to Duncanville from the standpoint of like, as you all mentioned, like, how do they handle everybody now chasing them? Not that anybody's ever, not paying attention to DeSoto or Duncanville on their schedule, right? Nobody, but now that they're officially not only the big program, the powerhouse, but also the reigning champs, how do they handle that as well? I'm fascinated to see that right out of the gate when they play Allen week 1 in Allen. I mean, that's going to be a fascinating matchup right away. How do they handle that pressure in that atmosphere in that stadium? I can't wait to watch that game.
I jump on them real quick. Now, if they're clearly, and you can put Louisville in there too, if they're clearly top tier, those 3 teams are kind of top tier. There's other teams you want to jump in there, but there's some up and coming teams. And Diggs, I want you to talk about this McKinney team, where you look at McKinney and you have them at 4, and they have D1 guys all over the place. Where'd they come from? I mean, McKinney's not one of the teams that we normally talk about, but we're talking about them now. Tell me what to expect out of this Lions squad.
McKinney is one of those kind of Jekyll and Hyde teams because they still haven't really had that signature win yet. They're kind of a team that we look at them and the talent is there, but you still got to win in a very talented 5-6A district, and they keep reloading. I really like Coach Shavers and what he does over at McKinney, how he's built up that program. We talked about Coach Odell and how he's built up that program. Shavers did not inherit a great program at McKinney, and he is doing amazing things over there. Brian Jackson, 2 years ago, he was thought to be the number 1 running back in the nation, according to some rankings, and it's kind of dropped a little bit, but obviously you can't deny that he's a D1 top 5, top 10 running back in the nation. And then you got their quarterback who transferred in from North Garland, the 9-6A MVP, which is going to make even more reason for you not to go see Garland games this year. Ward, we're just beating Ward up, and God's power, Waiui. They got Christian McIntosh, the really talented tight end. Their linebacker core is as good as it gets with Maki Frazier and Riley Pettijohn. Xavier Filsame, is an amazing on the backside of the things. They are so plugged in and they are building it up, building up their foundation. But the thing is, mentally, do they feel confident that they can win those games? But they played South Lake Carroll very close. That was a game that they probably should have won last year, but lost in the fourth quarter. So if McKinney can get past Carroll and some of those demons, I think they have a really good chance. But Ward, one thing we're really going to be watching this year, and it's going to relate to all of them, not necessarily Duncanville, but there are so many teams that could go D1 or D2 based on how things go out. A lot of people just think Louisville is going to be a de facto D1. Well, if two Plano schools make it, I know you're laughing over there, Ward. Two Plano schools make the playoffs. Louisville's going D2, and now we're going to be talking about Louisville in DeSoto, and I think Louisville would love to go D2 as opposed to D1.
I think they would too. A team they might, and if we're talking up and comers, a team they might find in Division II is a team Kenny's familiar with at North Crowley. They kind of stepped on the scene last year with their new stadium, and they're back. And they're not going to see too terribly much comp out of 3-6A. They'll get something from Trinity, but that team is ready to play.
Well, when I was looking at their schedule a little bit earlier, by October 21st, we'll know if they've won district. Basically, they play their three toughest district games, back to back to back. They got Arlington second week too, which I think is a kind of an under the radar team. I'm not saying they're going to be great, but I think the Colts are going to be pretty good this year for a bounce back year for them. But they got 6 guys on defense, 6 guys on offense coming back this year. I like is their defensive tackles. That guy, man, that Chris, what's his name? Starlin Brooks. That's it. Starlin Brooks. That guy is 6'2 and a half, about 340 pounds. He eats up the interior. If he takes both guards and the center and eats them up, which allows Thompson, DC Thompson, the other guy, to get a lot of sacks from the defensive tackle position. You get 4 sacks from the defensive tackle position. That's pretty good. That's going to make you free up your guys on the back end to make plays, and that's a very athletic bunch. A little inexperienced on defense. They're not as experienced as they were last year on the defensive side, but this year, I think it's going to be really tough for them to follow that act up because now everybody's circling them. They're not surprising anybody this year. There's no euphoria of the new stadium. Everybody goes, okay, North Crowley, we better be ready to play. So I think Gates is going to have to do a really good job of telling them, let's forget what happened last year. We can build on that, but this year is a whole new ball game because you're going to get a loaded gun from everybody on that schedule this year.
But they do have that confidence deal. Last year was like, can we do it? Can we do it? They went undefeated. They can do it. They know they can do it now. And they have the thing I always like to look on the roster, a guy labeled as an athlete, and that's Cornelius Warren. That's a guy you can plug and play. Yeah, when all heck breaks loose, you find this guy. Where's Cornelius at? All right, we'll put him somewhere, and he'll make that play. So maybe he's somebody that we can look forward to.
Well, you got the Cordorian West Davis kid that's also over there that's really good for them. And I really think I think you got the Jimerson kid, at the quarterback position. He had 27 TD passes last year for them and only 7 interceptions. It's a very balanced team. I think that's one of the keys for them. It's like, if the offense is not playing very well, the defense can bail them out in some of those games. And I really do think that you do build confidence on winning, but sometimes you can get overconfident. And now you're going to have a lot of people taking a look at North Crowley and knowing we better be ready to play. It'll be interesting. I think Gates, he did a phenomenal job with them last year.
Kenny just really highlights some of those great players they have, but North Crowley is one of those teams. That's kind of the point I was making earlier, the D1, D2 thing. If Bell and Trinity both make the playoffs, which is a realistic thing, and that North Crowley fans got to be scoreboard watching right now. North Crowley could go D1 or D2. Carroll is one of those teams. Even McKinney is one of those teams, because I don't know in 5-6A, as loaded of a district that is, that you can just guarantee it's going to be Prosper and Allen as your D1 teams. Probably, but McKinney still has to watch out. If McKinney Boyd or Rock Hill has a really good run this year and knocks Prosper off, or if Prosper's graduation from a couple of last couple of years, they've really been gutted with the opening of the new school over there. They are not necessarily a lock to make the playoffs. So there are so many teams that are D1, D2 that you just don't know what it's going to be. And that's part of the fun of 6A, is that there are these kind of sub storylines as part of these big storylines. And I think North Crowley is going to be scoreboard watching with the rest of these teams that I've been talking about.
Excellent point, Giggs. I mean, I totally forgot about the LD Bell and Trinity. If they and I have both of them in the playoffs. I mean, as of today. So I mean, that's not like it. It's something unusual. That's highly probable.
Very much so. It's one thing to win your district, but you need to look at everybody else and find out where you're going to go. We gone 30 minutes in this joint. We haven't even talked about South Lake Carroll. I mean, South Lake Carroll is always going to be South Lake Carroll. Now, Pat, I know they got some bad news a couple of weeks ago at that running back position with the transfer not being able to come over there. But talk to me about them. I mean, they have a big, tall quarterback that's got the pedigree, and they got Riley Dodge.
Yeah, I was going to mention, you said right there that South Lake Carroll is always going to be South Lake Carroll. Can we just take a second and just step back and appreciate the job that Riley Dodge has done since they hired him at 29 years old? I mean, there was so much talk about the nepotism and is he ready for that position? And it's just assumed that he was going to, he's going to step in and continue to do what they were doing. Well, they had only won 10 games 3 years in a row. He takes over and they've won 12 or 13 every single year that he's been there. He has done a fantastic job. Big questions this year now, clearly replacing Owen Allen, their all-time leading rusher. As you mentioned, Ward, they thought they had a transfer coming in Riley Wormley from Colleyville Heritage, who is not eligible to play this season. So they're going to have to find playmaking in the running game somewhere else. They're always going to have a good offensive line. That'll be the case once again this year. And they have their top wide receiver back in Oklahoma commit in Jacob Jordan. Jacob had 16 touchdown catches last year. Smaller guy, 5'9", extremely quick. Does a lot of great work out of the slot. He'll be catching passes from Graham Knowles, the 6'7" quarterback. He started 8 games last year, stepping in for injury. Now he's the unquestioned, no doubt starter going into this year. Big arm, again, 6'7", Georgia Tech commit. His dad was a pro tennis player, one of the best doubles tennis players in the world at one point. So he has the athletic genes going on in the family. My question about South Lake Carroll is, with them finding ways to do this every year, there's going to be a year at some point where someone finally catches up. And I thought last year might have been the year. I mean, Byron Nelson was right on their heels, and yet Carroll found a way to still go undefeated and win the district. Can they do it again? I mean, Byron Nelson has 11 starters back, all 11 on defense. They are really talented once again. They lost their quarterback. There's some questions on the offensive side. But one of these years is going to be that year that Carroll is out of nowhere, doesn't quite pull it off, and struggles to 11 or 12 wins instead of 13 in the regular season. Could it be this year? I'm not saying it's going to be, but there's going to be a lot in that passing game, especially now that they have the question at running back without Owen Allen and Wormley not being able to transfer in and play this season. So fascinated to see how they handle it right away. And we'll see if the rest of the district can catch up to them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny's probably going to talk about this. Nelson did kind of catch up. They'd kind of lost a lot of their receivers, but like you said, the experience is coming back on defense now instead of offense for Nelson. But now that they got a taste of winning and having people expect things from them, is that something that can jack them up for this year?
Well, I kind of wrote Keller and Byron Nelson kind of in the same deal last year. They both were kind of rolling in that district. Now, remember, it was the big undefeated game that was out at Keller last year on a Thursday night. It gets rained out because of the thunderstorms that came in. They started at 2 o'clock on that Friday afternoon, and South Lake Carroll took them behind the woodshed. It seems like every time that somebody's stepping up in that district, it's going to give South Lake their game of the week or the game of the year. South Lake Carroll just keeps putting that hammer on them. So I'm not going to pick against South Lake Carroll, but I do think that Byron Nelson is building something, it's got some building blocks that are going over there. I mean, they did a heck of a job last year to me, their wide receivers were great last year for them, made a lot of plays for them last year. The running back was excellent. It was very underrated running back for them last year, really grinded out a lot of yards. I think that Byron Nelson wants to kind of play more of maybe not that fast tempo, like most of the teams are kind of playing. I think they'd like to kind of play some pro set ball. If their defense can hold them, I think that they can give South Lake Carroll at least a run. I'm not saying they're going to get the district crown, no, but I think that they are the second best team in that district for sure.
You're right. Keller gave them a run last year. That they put them on the ropes there in the first half, and Keller's crowd travels with them wherever they go, and they were right there.
Knocked their quarterback out. Their quarterback out too with injury in that game. That's when Knowles took over too. So that was a game definitely in question.
That's true. Now, hey, look, we haven't talked about 5-6A, and that district usually has teams that not only challenge for a regional final game, but they go so far deep, including a Prosper team they don't have they lost their head coach. Allen lost their quarterback. Diggs, kind of talk about those two teams, because Prosper's that team where it feels like I don't pay them no mind until the playoffs happen. Then I have to wake up because they're all of a sudden playing Duncanville in the regional final or in the state semifinal.
You know, we talked a lot about this in the podcast, and I got a little flack for it, but I truly believe it's true. The first year of a coaching job is the hardest year, because there is so much that you're just trying to figure out, and you're trying to get your organizational scheme and set. Geyer had a first-year coach last year, and it was the first time that he was a head coach. So I think he had a lot to learn, but I think he's going to benefit from that experience this year. And now a lot of people are talking about McKinney being the top dog in this district, and I think Geyer is going to have a really good chance to kind of sit back and go, okay, we're not necessarily the targeted, but we should be. And they're going to have to figure out the quarterback. Obviously, replacing Jackson Arnold is an impossible feat, but Logan McLaughlin is expected to step in. You got Trey Joyner, and you still got a Bowen kid on this squad. I mean, we how can we ignore that? I mean, you got Eli at cornerback, and he's a special player as well. So their defensive line is fantastic. Denton Geyer is going to be a really, really good team. And I think last year on paper, they probably should have beat DeSoto and probably maybe should have even won that state championship. But now I think they're even going to be hungrier than ever. So Denton Geyer is a wounded animal in many ways, but they are a very talented team. Allen is kind of the same way. I mean, Allen, it's hard to know who's going to be on their roster until, on Monday when they have their very first practice, that people are moving in and out of there, but they've got some really, really impressive players. Obviously, Kavion Sibley, running back, and Zena Omiozulu on the defensive end are two fantastic benchmarks. And Allen, obviously, when you have 7,000 students, you're going to have some depth. Prosper is going to be a big question because, you got a new coach and you got a new high school. You got a lot of kids moving over. You had, the Walnut Grove. You lost some of your quarterbacks. You lost some of your depth, but they're really good on the offensive line. Ellis Davis, a 6'7", 260-pound kid. Obviously, they're going to have who's going to step in. I have it right now as Braden Imhoff. He was a freshman last year. It's going to be kind of the next big thing at Prosper, but they've got a lot of questions. And then Kevin Sperry over the summer left Rock Hill. Boyd is got some really good talent. So that district is going to be fun this year. And there's going to be a lot of teams with some unanswered questions with some chips on their shoulders. So Ward, when you go over there, make sure you take your bag of Lay's, because there's going to be plenty of chips to be given out across District 5-6A.
Yeah, but what's all this Geyer talk on paper? They should have beat this. So where were you last year when I was saying this stuff? Y'all let me let Claude write that stuff all over the board, and now all of a sudden, 8 months later, you're saying it. This is crazy.
It's your fault, Ward. I mean, I was just
hear
on what you said.
I want to build on first that I know Ward loves chips, and second that Diggs, you mentioned
what gave it away, the 2 chins.
Maybe it's championships. We'll talk about that. But you were talking about Geyer, and I'm fascinated this year because, as you mentioned, Coach Heim, second year, so he's going to know what he's doing, right? But he doesn't have Jackson Arnold anymore. I mean, the Gatorade National Player of the Year is now up in Norman playing for the Oklahoma Sooners. That's a huge loss. There's a big question at that quarterback position, but it's not a problem because their early schedule is pretty easy. Heath, Alito, Lancaster, Prosper, right out of the gate. I mean, they're going to be tested immediately. It gets easier later. They only have to play Allen and McKinney in district. So, I mean, it's no problem down. I mean, their schedule is a murderer's row, man. I mean, that 5-6A district is so good. They're going to be tested early and often. Yes, they're very talented. They're always going to be talented there. Let me give you a name, all right? Freshman coming in, Zane Rowe, 6'5" tight end, already with an offer from Georgia, A&M, and Arkansas. He's going to contribute right away as a freshman this year. I think he's going to be a big-time playmaker, and he could play some defensive end as well. But I'm curious how this team handles so much transition with a difficult schedule right away. And they've got to prove it immediately. There's not a lot of time to learn because it's not like they're going to be able to make up a lot of ground in district once they get there, because that district is really tough too. So while it's easier for Heim from the standpoint of he knows what he's doing maybe a little bit more, it's harder with the roster that he's been given in year 2 because there are a lot of questions, still talent, but a lot of questions there. How do they respond early, right away with that tough schedule?
What is the symbol for the Joker? Is it the question mark? I think that district's the question mark.
Yeah.
I think because there's a lot of questions all up in that district if you think about it. Just think about all the exodus out of Allen, the talent that's left there in the last year and a half, and Devon Mitchell, Michael Hawkins, DJ Hicks. I mean, you've had a lot of top-end Division I talent leave, Allen, where a lot of top Division I talent transferred to Allen in the past. Right. That's hard. Those are hard to overcome. But I think Zeno is the next in the line of the great players that come out of Allen. His brother's obviously at UT as an offensive lineman. He's going to be a sophomore this year. That guy is terrific. I think he can really build around that. You look around the Prosper School. We talked about Prosper. We talked about North Carolina and Louisville. Prosper beat them both in the playoffs last year. Yeah. Nobody talks about the road that Prosper did. They may have got belted by Duncanville there in the region, in the state semis, but that's no shade in that. Yeah, Duncanville does that to a lot of people. I do think, though, that it's going to be a transition period there because we just don't know how many people left to go to the new school. How many people? That's going to be big now because now you have 3 schools in Prosper. It's going to be hard to kind of replenish the numbers. Yeah. Maybe the athletes will be there, but the depth, I think, takes a quality hit there. Yes, as good as McKinney's going to be, I think, on paper, we still got, you had a pretty good quarterback last year. You got to fill those it's over there at SMU right now. It's going to be hard to replace that, in the numbers. And it didn't we didn't even talk about as much as Jackson Arnold was to their offense. What about Peyton Bowen? That guy last year, and he's also in Oklahoma. Yes, Eli is back there, but when you have a ball hawk back there playing the free safety position and in punt returns and kickoff returns that Bowen brought to that team, that's a massive hold the field. I do like the Josiah Martin kid. I think he's a terrific wide receiver for them. And I'm willing to say this, though. I might not have said this a couple years ago, but is Denton Geyer the best team in Denton now? It used to be Ryan, but it might be Denton Geyer now when you go from head to toe, from 1 to 110 on a roster. I think Denton Geyer may be more talented than Denton Ryan, and I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago.
I think you're right about that. And Coach Wigginton told me there's another Umeozulu coming up after Zena, so I don't even know what's going on over there. And he said that guy might even be more athletic, so I'm a little scared of these Umeozulus coming through.
We have some breaking news. Coach Hennigan has texted me right now. He's got #StillRyan coming up on the screen. So keep an eye on that.
That guy is some kind of tech savvy if he heard this thing already. Oh, hey, I'm going to put you back on the spot, Kenny, because there's another team that is going through some turnover as well down in Arlington. Martin used to, it's always Bob Wager. He gives us our best stories, Pat. As you know, he always has something good going on there. So uplifting. He went on to Nebraska. That didn't really work out for him, but he's got a new coach in there. They got the same kind of athletes, but new coach syndrome that Diggs always likes to talk about.
And they're going to have to replace a lot in that secondary last year. Was top end talent last year too. That's they've always been a very athletic bunch, on the back end of that bunch over there. So you're going to have some unproven talent that's going to have to come in and prove. Now, I always believe that Arlington Martin always has the best athletes in the world. The offensive lineman that's going to USC, his name escapes me. Yes, he is. He's the real deal. You can gain some yards running behind that guy for sure. The quarterback position, they've always had really athletic quarterbacks there at Arlington Martin. You don't have the standard drop back spread type guy that throws it there, kind of a dual type deal there, which I think fits in well with them because they've got athletic offensive linemen. Maybe not the big offensive line like Louisville's of the world or Duncanville, but they have very quick, offensive line. I think that's going to help them a lot. But anytime you replace a legend like that, it's going to be hard. There's going to be some growing pains initially anyway. There's no way of escaping that because what Coach Wager did there was a phenomenal job there. He was the face of Arlington Martin for nearly 2 decades. So, it's going to be hard for them to try to just all of a sudden be back where they were last year, making it to the second and third round of the playoffs. I'm just not so sure that's capable of doing that this year.
Ultimate, right? Coach Wager, him and Joey Mack can go down in the Hall of Fame as the ultimate rah-rah guys. But that 8-6A is kind of, it's little bit down this year, if you ask me anyway. So they may be able to rise up to the top anyway. Pat, before we get back to Diggs, let's talk about a couple other stalemate teams that are always there at all times, and that's Highland Park and that's Rockwall. Tell me what you know about those two squads, and are they going to challenge?
Well, let's start with Highland Park because, I mean, they seem to be in it every year under Coach Randy Allen there. This year might be his toughest coaching job he's had in a long time. I mean, only 4 returning starters on the entire team. I mean, that is saying something, and the expectations are going to be high once again. So the question is, can he get them ready to go? Again, very similar to our conversation we had about Geyer a second ago. I mean, early on, Highland Park playing at Flower Mound Marcus, then Louisville. They're at Highlander Stadium, at a place that they never lose, right? That's going to be really tough. We're going to be there for Big Game Friday. I can assure you that on NBC 5. And then their first district game might be the most important district game of the year at Lake Highlands, a team that almost beat them at Highland Park last year when they had 70 in their senior class and these guys graduated. So there are major questions at this program. And yet, what do we know about Randy Allen? What do we know about Highland Park? Who you see in week 1 is not who you're going to see come mid-October. That program, that team gets better every single week. That is one reason why they win so many games and they've made so many deep runs in the playoffs, because they seem to improve in a way that maybe other programs don't quite do throughout the year. There have been multiple times we've covered their games early in the season and then seen them in the second round of the playoffs. And I'm looking at Noah Bullard, our photographer, and I'm like, who are these guys? You know, 'cause I don't remember this back in late August or early September. So I think this year could be one of those years for Highland Park. If they can somehow survive the early part of the season, I'm not expecting them to go undefeated through those first 3 games. But if they can find a way to win 2 of them, you know, and maybe be 2-1 through 3 somehow, then this is a team that absolutely I expect to be a legitimate playoff, deep run, Thanksgiving weekend type contender once the playoffs go. The question is, though, how are they going to respond? Their quarterback, Warren Peck, 6'5", big arm, hasn't played a whole lot, you know, so we'll see how he handles the opportunity. It's going to be a packed house right away. A lot of expectations for that quarterback position there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I really like their linebacker, Jack Morse. He's going to be a junior this year. He's already making plays, had over 90 tackles last year as a sophomore at Highland Park. That speaks volumes as well. So fascinated to see how Randy Allen does things there. And then you asked about Rockwall, Ward. Coach Trey Brooks, I think, has done a really good job there too, taking over for Rodney Webb a couple of years ago. And now he's getting ready to have to face Rodney Webb in that huge rivalry game, Rockwall against Rockwall Heath. Really interesting approach, at least early on. At least the reports coming out of Rockwall right now is that they're saying they're going to play 2 quarterbacks this year, that they're okay with going with the 2 guys.
I can tell you Diggs don't like that.
Mason Marshall and Landon Locke. Landon is Braden's younger brother. And according to Coach Brooks, they're really good friends and they're okay with splitting the time and just taking turns. But, you know, what's the old adage that if you don't have one, you know, quarterback, if you have, you know, you don't have any, you know,
you got none. Yeah.
Right. You got 2, you got none. That's what it was. But I mean, but Coach Brooks has done a great job. That choice system they run up there. I mean, they put up huge points. It feels like every single week and every single year. So I don't know how that's going to work. You know, I mean, at some point you would think that one guy's going to kind of emerge a little bit more than the other guy. But I mean, their early schedule too. I mean, Cedar Hill, Jesuit, Prosper, you know, like, again, you know, a lot of early tough matchups there. They're going to have to be ready to go right away. I expect them to be really good. I can't wait to be there though for that rivalry game. Rockwall Heath will absolutely be our Big Game Friday game of the week on NBC 5 that week when Coach Webb takes on his former team there. I mean, in that 2 high school town, you know, in Rockwall there, that game is going to be a hot ticket and it's going to be a big night. I cannot wait for that.
Will it measure up to last year's game?
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I love it when
the drama in the buildup will be more than it's ever been. That's all I know. I don't know about the actual game, but leading up to it, I mean, they're already talking about it right now. And Coach Webb even told me a couple months ago, he was like, I'm already pacing because thinking about that day, you know, what it's going to be like. So
I love it when Pat makes a schedule for me too. When he tells me where he's going to be, that tells me where I'm not going to be. So that's several games I need to know I can mark off the schedule. Go ahead,
guys, do you think that, though, for the Highland Park, do you think this is the first time in about 8 years that they've really got an unproven commodity at quarterback for Highland Park? I mean, you
know,
it's
kind of feels that way.
You know, I mean, this is the first year that we just don't know. I mean, yeah, the measurables look great and everything, but we don't have any pedigree to say that, yeah, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. I mean, the last three quarterbacks, we knew what we had for sure. And
they don't have much back at the skill positions either. And a lot of these unproven quarterbacks that we're talking about around DFW and these like high level programs, well, they have their star receiver back, or they have a great running game back. But for Highland Park, I mean, there are a lot of just unproven players in that group. That doesn't mean they're not going to have a great season. That scheme is great. Again, Coach Allen does a great job, but there's a lot on the quarterback there to be able to play well. And then he's relying on guys who haven't done it under the bright lights on Friday nights either. So I'm fascinated to see how they handle that. I'm expecting them to handle it well because they seem to handle it well every year. But it's definitely new territory when it comes to this amount of unproven on the field for the Scots.
Yeah, you talk about Highland Park. The last 4 or 5 years, it always seems like Randy Allen's got one foot out the door. Now, if he thought nothing was coming back, he'd have both them feet out the door and he'd be off doing something else. So he's got something there that whether we can find it yet or not, he knows he's got something. Diggs, if he's talking about Rockwall and Highland Park, those two districts, 10 and 7-6A, is there anybody that can give him a challenge? Because last year, Mesquite Horn is one of those up-and-comers that came up out of nowhere and was battling teams. They didn't have a very good playoff run, but they certainly did have a good district run.
10-6A has got some fascinating storylines. Obviously, the Rockwall Heath game. If we can get back to a couple of years ago, Pat may not make it on the air by that. If we go triple overtime and another 75-70 game, maybe
won't have a final score.
Maybe happening during the sports segment as far as that goes. But Mesquite,
I was there. I feel like it was mid-third quarter when we were doing our sports cast because there were scoring points every 30 seconds. It felt like it was crazy.
It was, but Mesquite Horn, man, what Courtney Allen has done over there, coming over from North Crowley, he has just picked up and has done fantastic things at Mesquite Horn. Mesquite Horn's going to have to figure out the double quarterback situation as well. They've got two really good running backs coming back. Their defense is loaded. I think Mesquite Horn has a really good chance. Tyler Legacy is a team to kind of keep an eye on because, out there in East Texas, they've got a new coach, but I really like their quarterback, Luke Wolf. I think he has a chance to, if you got to make the road trip out there and you're a little bit sluggish, Tyler Legacy is good enough to knock you out. But Pat was also talking about how you kind of see Highland Park continually going up throughout the year. And one of the reasons why is that they're kind of gifted with a really easy district. The bottom half of that district is not as strong as a lot of other districts. But this year, what they're going to be pushed on is the upper half of the district is really talented. And one of my teams to watch out for is Berkner. Berkner just can, I'm finding out every day, somebody said, Jesuit lost their best receiver. And where did he end up going to? Berkner. Berkner is that team that just is on the rise, kind of like McKinney. You got Damian Crow has exploded over the offseason. You've got Cornell McGee coming back at quarterback. Jamari Williams was a fantastic running back. And they've got 3 or 4 new kids that, you don't even realize are Berkner Rams who, once the season starts, you're going to realize that they're very good. And we're ignoring Lake Highlands. They've got a new coach, Corey Campbell, but they got Trip Hawley coming back and Deontay Dean. And then we're ignoring Jesuit, who is consistently good at the same time. So that top half of the district in 7-6A, you can quote me on this, Ward. I think we may have an opportunity to see 7-6A sweep 8-6A because there are so many questions in Arlington ISD, and the top half of this district, 7-6A, looks absolutely loaded.
That's wild. That's wild. What do you say, Kenny?
I was going to say, does Coach Hickman and Coach Allen, do they get the most out of their players year after year after year? I mean, it's unbelievable. If you have this much left, he gets this much left out of you. And you look up there and you say, well, this is not really a talented roster. This is not a very physical team. They don't look good coming off the bus. But then when you look at the final score, you're on the wrong end of it. It's just, they don't kill themselves. And I think Diggs did make a great point too. I think that Highland Park the last few years has been benefit of not having a strong district. So they were able to kind of get some momentum going into the playoffs, beating some teams and getting some of their backups some quality time, which I think is huge, especially in late October and early November, is getting your backups because inevitably you're going to get somebody hurt. It comes. It's part of the business. But I do think that this year would be the first time that I can look up and say Highland Park may not win this district. I mean, it's not a given, and I'd be really interested to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and Pat talked about that tough top 3 games. Well, I don't think if he can get a district title, I don't think Coach Allen would care if they went 0-3 if he found out what they got in those games and found out who he has that he can count on and throw out there and put a C on their chest and lead them through that district play and get them a title. Because you talked about Thanksgiving type games for them where they're going to end up playing Guyer in the second round if everything plays out like it did last year, and that was heck of a game at the start of the last time, so it might be again. Let's roll this. Let's finish this thing off by talking about some teams, maybe not sleeper teams, but teams that you want to keep one of your eyes on to at least look at. I know I'm going to talk about Eaton just because of Noah Lugo. I know he's getting a lot of props through the 7-on-7 seasons, and he's really stepped up his quarterback game. He got to cut down on the turnovers because there was a lot of picks he threw last year. But if they're going to make it to the playoffs, so I'm not pushing them past deep into the playoffs, but just getting there, he's going to have to lead that team, and I think he can do it. Is any Diggs? You got anybody that you want to talk about? Any team that you think we should keep an eye on? I know you just said Berkner, but maybe somebody else.
Yeah, a few teams you got to kind of keep an eye on. And I know we talked about this in the district breakdown. I'm very excited about Cedar Hill. I can't wait. Cedar Hill's got a murderer's row for their non-district as well. If they can get past that, the first 5 games, and they come out on the other side still optimistic, I think they have a really good chance to compete with Waxahachie and Mansfield to get into the playoffs in 11-6A. So keep an eye on that. This is partially my podcast, so I got to talk a little bit about Plano East Ward. I at least have to say the word Plano East. There he goes. He's canceling out on that. But
man, we're running out of time. We are running out of time.
He's a fantastic quarterback. He's a fantastic baseball player. I mean, he's a kid that you may be filming in week 1 if all goes well. And obviously, I think the 3 teams are going to be very competitive for the last 2 playoff spots in 6A. You got Hebron, Plano, Coppell, and Marcus, all very competitive for 3 playoff spots there. And then Flower Mound. I mean, that's a team you talk about with Jesuit and Highland Park that always get out of their kids. And don't they have an Evers coming in this year?
They got Evers, man. They got the big Evers boy.
Big Evers coming in. So
he used to block my son all over the place until my son quit football. That's how bad he is. That's how bad that boy is.
So keep an eye on him. And we haven't talked about, you talked about Northwest Eaton, but Keller is a team I'm very excited about too. Keller has a chance to be really good this year. It's going to be their sophomores. They got 2 sophomores who are fighting for playing time at quarterback. If they can, one of them can kind of stick, I think Keller has a chance to be really good. And I'm also excited about Crowley. We talk, it's possible that we see North Crowley and Crowley playing for a district title. And that could be a very fun week 11 game if that game happens. So those are some of my dark horses.
Well, listen,
I want to mention one dark horse as well. I mean, we mentioned their name just a second ago, but coaching matters a lot in high school football. Rodney Webb is a great coach, and they have their quarterback back. Hoover's back again. They got a safety named Brady Luff, who's a really good player. Coach Webb took that job in part because he was excited to be back in that Rockwall area. He missed it. He missed coaching for sure. But he also told me when I was out at spring ball practice, and just chatting with him a little bit, he was like, we have some players. I mean, we have a chance to be pretty good. I'm not saying they're necessarily winning a district title or anything like that, but with everything they've been through in the offseason and everything that happened in that program with the offseason workout, national news that happened and all of that, he was the perfect coach to come in and steady the ship, get everything back on track. And I would not be surprised if they win 2 or 3 more games than what everybody's expecting. And if they shock and maybe upset somebody in a playoff game and go from there. So Rockwall Heath is that team I'm looking at. And that's why another reason I'm really excited about that Rockwall against Heath game, because I think Rockwall is probably the better team. But at the same time, that's the kind of game that a great coach like Rodney Webb somehow finds a way to pull out of nowhere. So that's my kind of dark horse that I don't think enough people are talking about beyond just that he's back. I think they're going to win a lot more games.
And I like what Diggsy kind of said on our deal about Webb. He's got no insight, but the fact that Webb went from Rockwall to Guyer and then went to AD at HP and then to Heath kind of makes you feel like he's trying to play himself into an AD job over there at Rockwall when his time has come. That was something Diggs brought up in the deal, but it makes sense. He's got a house out there and he's ready to go. Kenny, who you got? I mean, you're muted right now, but talk to me about who you got as a dark horse.
Well, I was talking, a quick note on Webb. I saw him at Coach Brazel's funeral, and I told him, I said, we talked about this at the Louisville Prosper game on the field, that you weren't going to get back into coaching. And then a month later, you decided to do it. I said, man, nice inside word. You know, I mean, it's like, I appreciate that. I could have came out with a breaking news line, you know? But I do wish him the best. I want to talk, maybe go in a different angle here. I think the intrigue here is for the Flower Mound schools. Can they bounce back? I mean, they perennially have been very good. I mean, Marcus had a down year last year. Flower Mound on their account had a down year last year. And even Hebron, to a point, is not what they're doing. I think Hebron's going to have a really tough task of trying to bounce back, obviously, with the tough loss of Coach Brazel, passing this past summer. There are talent, but there are a lot of unproven talent. And in that district, it's not easy to go in with unproven talent and win on a consistent basis. So I think if all three of those schools, who can kind of catch on early, I think will have the inside job to get one of those last playoff spots in that district.
How about Euless Trinity? I mean, with what they went through last year.
On an hour through, we haven't talked about Trinity, huh? Yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, based on what happened last year, it was, they struggled last year. In Coach Lineweaver's first season, I think everybody's expecting them to be much better, and so they're a team I'm watching as well. I don't have a lot of insight as to how they're going to potentially get it better. I think, the talk from that school, from that area is that, hey, we figured it out in year one of Coach Lineweaver there, and we're ready to take a huge step forward this season. So I'm watching them closely as well. It was unusual seeing Euless Trinity with that record last season. It feels like things have to kind of overcorrect to get back to normal, and I'm expecting them to be very good again this year.
Yeah, Diggs, how do you think they'll play in that role of nobody's talking about them? And that never happens down there in Euless, but nobody's really saying anything until Pat did an hour into this podcast.
It did in year one to year two. That's the biggest coaching growth. And, if you don't see that, they might decide that, it might not be, they might need to go a different way. They might need to consider, maybe going spread or something, get away from the Trinity as we know it. But I think we're going to see that Trinity bounce back. And we talk about those chips. We talked about chips in 5-6A. We talked about your love of Lays. And I think in 3-6A, Trinity as an underdog is a very dangerous team. And I think North Crowley's got to keep an eye on them, because the way they slow down the game, limit possessions, you get 1 or 2 turnovers at North Crowley and you're toast.
Yeah.
The day we see Trinity spread out 5 wide, shotgun, okay, I'm done. I'm out. No more. That's it. Too much. Okay. I need them lined up and power eye, and I need to see that smash mouth football. Okay, if they start spreading it out, Diggs, I'm coming to you first, and then after that, I'm out. It's over. Or you're on your own for Inside High School Sports.
Well, sticking with the same district, what about LD Bell? I mean, they actually were competitive last year. I mean, it's kind of weird seeing that LD Bell had been kind of the doormat for a few years there, and Trinity was the king of the district. Now you're getting to kind of swing the pendulum back the other way a little bit. So I'm dying to see what that game's going to be like. So I think this year, maybe Bell, can they get off the snide?
I would love to see them in the postseason, boy. What did they start 6-0 last year, right? Get in there, man. I'd love to see them get in that joint. And so that we don't completely blow off 9-6A, I want to see why East second season here. They went to 9-1, almost 10-0. They lost that last regular season game. And they have a great athlete in Michael Henderson, especially a defensive back. I want to see them jump back out there and prove they can do it 2 years in a row in 9-6A, which is not going to be as competitive as some of these other districts, but so they can make some noise in there. Fellas, this has been fun, man. I appreciate you guys getting us all ready. I mean, the Friday night lights are going to be for this Friday, the 24th. Sorry, Thursday 1st. And me and Pat we're moving to another time slot, man. We're on Sunday mornings now, 10 a.m. We're also Sunday evenings at 11:30, so everybody can catch our show. Pat will be ready. He's always bringing the juice. And then you can always see Kenny, man. I'm telling you, Kenny's always on every sideline. If you can't see him, wait for him to smile, because that smile's as big as anything, man. He's always there. So we'll see you on the sidelines. Diggs, we'll see you at every Plano East game and a couple other ones once they don't make the playoffs. We'll see you somewhere else. Sorry, Coach B. I'm just joking with Diggs. I'm sure you'll have a good shot at the postseason. But I appreciate you joining us. We're going to be doing Digging for Wisdom all season long. This is going to get you ready for the season. I know I'm ready. These guys are ready. Let's get at it.
Thanks for having me.